Good day, grade 12s, and welcome to another episode of the grade 12 Settlement Geography CAPS series. So, of course, by the looks of this presentation, we can tell that in this video, we are definitely going to be looking at urban structure and patterns, right? So, let's go to our CAPS document and zoom in. So, we've already done that. The urban hierarchies. So we did do all of that. So if you haven't watched that video, guys, please do. The urban hierarchies are covered, actually everything over there. So please go check that out. So meaning which we are going to be starting a new subtopic, which is urban structure and patterns. And in this video, of course, this is what we'll be covering: the internal structure and patterns of urban settlements. So meaning which we'll be looking at land use zones, the concept of urban profile, and the factors that are influencing the morphological structure of a city. Right, so that's what we will be covering in today's video. So please don't miss any second of the video, as I will be including tips and common questions that you will get on this concept. And this is usually on question 1.4, right? So you'll get this on question 1.4. So please, let's practice, guys. Past papers are important, they are critical. So let's go practice question 1.4 after this video. Look at past papers and practice on as many past papers as you can, okay? So without wasting any time, let's get into it. Right, so in this video, we'll be looking at the structure of an urban area, right? So in a nutshell, we are basically looking at how different parts of an urban area are used, okay? This particular area is used for this purpose. This particular area is used for this activity. So it is basically divided into different parts of activities or of land uses. So the concept of land use zone, it's simply an area of land that is used for the same specific purpose. So this particular area is used, or this is where you're gonna find this and that. In this particular area, this is where you're gonna find this and that. These are the characteristics of this particular area. This particular area is different from this particular area because here this is what is being done, so on and so on. So that's what we're looking at, guys, looking at different parts of the urban area as a whole. So it's basically cut into different parts, or basically sectionalized, if you can put it that way. Yeah, I spent a lot of time drawing, guys, so it's not accurate, but I really tried my best, to be honest. I spent a lot of time on this, so I hope that you are going to benefit a lot from this, okay? So as I was saying, guys, the urban area as a whole is basically divided into different parts, and we call those land use zones, right? So you have to be able to identify each zone, be able to describe its characteristics, and as well as its relationship with other land use zones, because as much as these are different, right, they do have a relationship with each other, and you have to be able to describe that, as well as the problems that are faced in some areas, the solutions. It's actually a lot, okay? It's a lot that they can ask you here in 1.4, question 1.4 of paper 2. This is where you're gonna get the land use zone questions. All right. So we'll start by identifying different types of land use zones and discussing, of course, their individual characteristics. And of course, during that, we'll also discuss some of the problems, some solutions, and as well as the relationships between these individual land use zones. So we'll start with the first one. Okay. And the first one is actually found right in the center, okay, of the urban area, right in the center of the urban area. That's the first type of land use zone, and we call that the CBD, guys, right? So this is the CBD, right? So CBD, that's an acronym. It stands for Central Business District. Central Business District. So this is the only land use zone that is actually found in the city center, or at the center of the urban area, and it is where a lot of commercial activities take place. So you're going to find a lot of businesses there. It's where a lot of businesses have been established, right? Or it's where a lot of commercial activities take place, right? So the location, of course, you have to know that. So the location, guys, it's in the city center, or it's in the center of the urban area. area, right? So let's now discuss the characteristics of the CBD. First things first, you're going to find the tallest buildings here in the CBD. It's actually the tallest buildings in an urban area. So the whole urban area, this is where you're going to find the tallest buildings. You're going to find them in the CBD. And the reason why you have the tallest buildings is because the land is expensive. Okay, so this is very expensive piece of land, the land use zone here. So there's high value of land. It's very expensive because of high demand. Every business wants to be there. So there's a lot of buildings in the CBD because every business wants to be there. That's where there's a lot of customers. Everyone is going there, right? I'm sure you even get annoyed on the way because there's a lot of traffic, right? So that is the characteristics of the CBD. There's a lot of activity going on there. There's a lot of people in there. And so for you as a business, for you to be profitable, of course, you need a lot of customers. And so you want to establish a business there. You want to have a building over there. And so now that increases the demand. So the demand now is high. And so this means that the price to rent there, a building, is high. So this drives the prices up. It also drives the value of the land there. So the CBD has a very high value of land. So the land value there is huge. So it's very expensive in the CBD because of this high demand, right? Nowadays, it is decreasing the demand. We'll talk about that though later on in the video, right? Let's imagine, guys, let's say now you are a business owner and you have a building. Okay, so let's go back here to this diagram, guys. Right, so let's say this is our building. Okay, let's say we have a business and this is where operations occur in this building. Okay, we've employed people here. We see that, okay, the money is coming in and we want to expand. Okay, we want to employ more people and so we want to expand. How do we do that? Okay, can we go horizontally and try to expand this way? We cannot because there's a lot of buildings. There's buildings around us, and not only because of that, it's because that's going to be very expensive buying land. Remember, the CBD has pricey land, right? So the land value is very high. So the only way we can expand is to go upwards. So we build going upwards, right? Because the land is expensive. It would be expensive for us to try and expand. We'd have to buy the land from those buildings, so which is not going to be good for us because it's expensive, right? So that's why buildings build going upwards, grow taller and taller and taller because it is expensive to build going sideways. There's not a lot of space available, okay, because of this high demand. All right, hope you understood that. Another characteristic about the CBD is that it is the most accessible. So what we mean is that, well, it's easy to get there. Every road actually leads there. Yeah, every road meets up there. So as you can see, guys, this is the CBD right in the center, right over here. You have this road moving into the CBD. You have that road moving into the CBD. You have this road moving into the CBD. You have that road moving into the CBD, so on and so on. So as you can see, guys, a lot of roads converge here. So it is very accessible. So that's what we meant there by it is the most accessible, right? So that is one of the very important characteristics of the CBD. It's most accessible. And the CBD has a high building density. I think I've already mentioned that. So high building density, guys, we mean that, okay, you have this particular area. This is the piece of land that you have. And you have many buildings, many buildings in this single piece of land. So that's what we mean by high building density. There's a lot of buildings in this particular square kilometer or whatever area that you have there. Okay. So that's what we mean by high building density, a lot of building. And of course, I'm sure you might have noticed that when you go to the city, that you have building next to another building, next to another building. There's a lot of these buildings, right? Because of the high demand, right? Every customer is going there, so every business wants to be there. And another characteristic is because now you have these buildings, right? Because you have a lot of these buildings, this means that the natural aesthetic appeal is not there. Okay, you do not have trees, you do not have the grass, right? So it's concrete, it's tar, it's glass, it's all of these are man-made materials that are used to build those buildings, of course. So it lacks that natural beauty. That's one of the downsides of the CBD. It lacks that beauty, that natural beauty, because there's a lot of people, there's a lot of businesses. It is so much concentrated, as you can imagine. And we also note that in the CBD, there's a lot of crime. Okay. I've heard that in Joburg, there's actually a lot of crime in the CBDs. Actually, that's actually true for a lot of CBDs. There's a lot of crime because there's a lot of people, and so people take advantage due to the high number of people there. So there's a lot of criminal activities occurring in the city center, right? So those are some of the characteristics of the CBD. Please do not forget them. They like to ask these. So in these questions, like in the exam, they can actually provide you with a photograph, actually, or a diagram, right? And they ask you to identify this particular land use zone. Let's say they maybe wrote A here. Identify the land use zone A, right? You identify that. And then the next question is explain your answer. Well, it's easy, guys. This is where you have the tallest buildings. You can clearly see that you have the tallest buildings. That's number one. Number two, you can clearly see that all roads converge here. Okay. So it is the most accessible. So we're not talking about things that you cannot see. It's actually there. You can clearly see that. Okay. So let's be able to identify these land use zones. Okay. So these characteristics are very important, guys. Now, going back to that point, I think I mentioned, right? So I said that the CBD has very high land value, right? Due to high demand. Okay. But now businesses are actually moving. They are trying to avoid the CBD. Every new business that has been established does not want to actually move to the CBD, right? So the demand is actually decreasing now. Okay. So we're talking about modern times, right? So the demand is decreasing. Why is it decreasing? It's because of the issues that are associated with the CBD. So they can actually ask you to do that to explain why businesses are avoiding moving into the CBD. So the CBD, as much as it employs a lot of people, participates in the GDP, so on and so on, actually is not attractive for investors. And this is the reason why. First things first, a lot of people commute here. Okay, a lot of people travel here daily. There's a lot of people that work in the CBD. And so you can imagine the amount of vehicles there. So you can imagine each building, how many people does it employ? So it's a lot of people. And so this means that a lot of people come in here in this particular land use zone, the CBD. And so you can imagine the traffic congestion. So a lot of people commute here daily, causing therefore traffic congestion. Hence, this also will of course affect businesses. Okay, if I am running a business and it also provides delivery, I would have a lot of delays because of this traffic congestion. A lot of, especially during peak hours, guys, like during the morning, like at 6 or 7 a.m., and during the evening as well, like at 5. So there's a lot of cars. And so this is not good for investors who are looking to establish a business in the CBD. Okay. There's a lot of traffic congestion that would affect definitely deliveries. Number two, there's lack of space for expansion. As I said, the only way you can expand is to go up, right? You can only go up because there's a lot of buildings, first of all, around you, and the land value is expensive, right? So, lack of space for expansion, you cannot even expand. Or if you do so, you'd have to pay a lot of money for that. The third problem is that there's a lack of parking space. Okay, so if I am going to have a business, my employees are definitely going to need parking space, but there's no parking space here in the CBD because a lot of people take up the parking space. A lot of vehicles do so because there's no space. There's a lot of people. Another one is that there's a high number of informal traders. Okay, have you seen that, guys? When you go to a CBD, you are going to find a lot of vendors, a lot of informal traders. Yeah, and a lot of homeless people actually are scattered around the CBD. So for some businesses, that is not attractive. Okay, actually, for every business, it's not attractive. So it's not attractive for a business to have hawkers running their businesses just outside the business. So it actually affects the appeal of the business itself. There's high crime here. Okay, so as I mentioned, guys, a lot of crime that occurs in the CBD. A lot of people take advantage of vulnerable people, and yeah, we've seen a lot of that. Okay, or we've heard a lot of that about the CBD. Traffic congestion causes delays. I actually have covered this, so I actually wrote this twice. So let me actually just strike it out. There's high rentals. Okay, due to high demand. It's expensive to have a business there. It's expensive to rent. So there are higher rentals in the CBD. And of course, if I'm paying a lot of rent to run a business here, then I'm going to have high prices. Okay, I'm going to have expensive prices to try and make a profit. Okay, or to try and break even. So high rentals due to the high demand. And so it's very expensive to run a business here. And this also affects as well as the prices that we see in the CBD. It's actually expensive as well. The CBD also usually has a grid iron street pattern. So we covered street patterns, guys. Please check that out if you haven't. So it has this grid iron street pattern, which is these roads that intersect each other like that. So there's basically a lot of stops in between. So you can imagine having to drive from point A to point B. How many stops are you going to have there? So because each intersection has to have traffic lights or robots, I'll have to stop at every intersection. So that of course delays me. It's another thing that delays me on top of the many vehicles that are on these roads in the CBD. So I'm going to go and stop there and go and stop there and go and stop there, so on and so on and so on. So it's quite annoying to actually have to do that. So this grid iron street pattern slows traffic and increases the likelihood of accidents. Okay, having to stop at each and every intersection increases the probability of having accidents. And so you can imagine, guys, as a business investor, you cannot have a business here. You do not consider it because of these many reasons and many more. So you'd rather move to another area that does not have these problems. And that area nowadays is called the outlying business district. Okay. So outlying business districts, for an example, like Senton. Senton is an example of an outlying business district. They have an area there that is like a small CBD, right? But it's not CBD because the CBD there is the Joburg CBD. So they have this outlying business district. It does not have any of these problems. It does not have the problem of traffic congestion, right? It does not have the problem of space. It does not have the problem of parking space. It does not have high crime. It does not have high rentals, so on and so on and so on. So it does not have all of these problems that are faced by businesses that have buildings in the CBD. So this is where businesses are relocating now to the outlying business districts, and this movement of businesses from the CBD to these areas such as the OBEs, we call that decentralization, or it's also called commercial decentralization to be specific. So it's basically that movement of businesses away from the CBD. That is what commercial decentralization is. So also be able to define it and also be able to discuss the reasons why these businesses are moving away from this CBD. Okay. So that's basically a solution to the problems that are faced here. Businesses have to move out, move to other areas that are attractive. Okay, so OBEs are attractive to business investors. So that is the CBD, guys. Be able to mention these characteristics, be able to identify it, be able to discuss the reasons why businesses are moving away. They love these type of questions. Now, I've been looking at past papers, and a lot of those past papers included the question, why are businesses moving away from CBD, or why businesses are moving to other areas. Okay. So let's please ensure that we are able to discuss that. Right. So that is the central business district in the city center, where there are tallest buildings, where the land value is high, where there's a lot of activity occurring there, such that it's creating a lot of problems, such that now businesses are moving away from it because of those problems. Let's move on to the next one, and that is the industrial zones. Right, so we have areas that are allocated for industrial activities. Remember, industries, that is where processing occurs, right? That is where the raw materials are being processed into finished goods. Okay. And we actually have two types of these. We have heavy industries and light industries. I think we did cover these. I'm not sure, guys. But yeah, it's been quite a long time now, such that I don't even remember. But yeah, we have two types of these industrial zones. We have the heavy industrial zone, or heavy industries, and the light industrial zone, or light industries. And you have to be able to state their locations. Okay, so the heavy industries are located in the outskirts or on the periphery of the urban area. So periphery, we mean away from the center. Okay, so if this is the center, then the heavy industries, you're going to find them around these. Okay, on the outskirts, on these areas. Okay, and I actually have them right over here. Okay, so this is a huge area. I tried drawing a lot of different types of buildings, and I just decided to have just a simple one. So this is an example of a heavy industry. Okay, so heavy industrial areas or heavy industrial zones are going to be far away from the center, or far away from the CBD, and far away actually from high income areas. And we'll talk about that. So that is their location. They are on the outskirts, or on the periphery, or on the edge of urban areas, right? And why are they there? First of all, is because they produce air, noise, and water pollution, right? So they cannot be near where people live or people reside. Okay, so they cannot be near where people stay, right? So that's why they are far away. They produce a lot of this pollution, and that is not healthy for people. And another reason is that here land is cheap, right? So actually, land becomes less and less valuable as you move away from the city. So remember, the CBD has the highest land value, or the land value is highest, or is very high there. And the land value actually decreases when you move towards the heavy industrial area. So here there's cheap land, and the land is flat, and yeah, they can expand. So it's easy for them to expand. That's why they have this huge building here that expands horizontally. So they can expand, so they don't have to go upwards here because the land is cheap. And so they can just buy all of that land and then build a huge building there. They are located in this area because they produce a lot of pollution. So it's not healthy for industries to be close to people due to health risks. And the second reason is that, well, the land is cheaper here. Okay, so they can expand as much as they can. And over here, the land is available for expansion, unlike in the CBD. CBD, it is concentrated, and of course, the land value is very expensive. And heavy industrial areas actually have neighboring communities, and those neighboring communities are actually low income or informal settlements. Okay, so these are residential areas where the residents do not afford much. They live under, some of them live under the poverty line, most of them live under the poverty line. And so they want these jobs, they want to be close to these heavy industries. So heavy industrial zones are going to be near low income housing and informal settlements. Okay, because, well, for informal settlement residents and low income residential residents, it's cheap for them to actually go to work. Okay, so they need employment, they need jobs, and so they want to be close to areas where they can work, close to employment, close to these heavy industrial areas, even though they are a health risk. You're going to find low income residential areas and informal settlements right next to the heavy industrial zone because of work. They want to be close to work. They don't want to be paying a lot of transport money. And of course, they want to reduce travel time. So you have the nearby labor supply from low income and informal settlements. So it's good for heavy industrial zones because they can have workers that live close by, and so that's good for them. They also prefer flat land because there's a lot of processing occurring there. You cannot be on a hill, and they definitely prefer to be close to roads because they are constantly transporting goods. So whatever good that is produced there is going to be taken into that truck. That truck moves into the CBD and transports goods. So they want to be near the road. They want to have access to the road. They want to have access to a railway if there's a railway so that they can transport, of course, their finished goods. Okay. But now, of course, as we mentioned, guys, heavy industries are a health risk for people. And so they constantly produce air pollution, noise pollution, which affects, of course, the health of these nearby communities. And I'm talking about these low income residential zones as well as these informal settlements. So for them, they constantly get affected by that pollution that is produced from the heavy industries. The second problem that is associated with heavy industries is that, of course, when they build their buildings, they are going to remove vegetation that was there, right? So that they can build, so that they can dig, build foundations, so on and so on. And so, of course, that degrades the lands. That is a negative impact on the environment. Okay. So it also promotes soil erosion over there. So you can add that as well. Okay. So another point is that these heavy industries use these chemicals. Okay. They process. Okay. A process uses chemicals, and these chemicals, if there's not good management, they get dumped into rivers that are nearby, which is definitely going to affect the aquatic life or the ecosystems in those rivers. So it's not good for the plants and animals that are in those rivers or actually around this environment because, of course, of the land and water pollution that is produced by these heavy industries. And of course, if you are going to produce a lot of pollution, you are going to affect a lot of organisms, plants and animals, and some of them are going to be extinct. And so, of course, this means that the biodiversity will decrease. Okay, by biodiversity, guys, we mean you no longer have different types of animals and plants because now you got rid of some of them by your actions. Okay, some of them are going to be erased, get killed. So now you no longer have the diversity, the different types of plants and animals. So the diversity is then reduced. That's what we mean by biodiversity is reduced or decreases. So I don't know if you have noticed, guys, but in geography, you have a point, right? You write down your point. So let's say it's one of those 8-mark questions where you mention, of course, your points. You write down your first point. Now, your first point affects something, right? And then that something is going to be your second point, so on and so on and so on. This is your third point, and that's your fourth point. So you should really be smart about your paragraphs, how you write those. Another student could have just included this as one point. So the chemicals get dumped into the rivers, affecting aquatic life and therefore decreasing biodiversity. Yeah, he or she could have just separated those. And by doing that, he or she could have gotten 4 marks instead of just 2. Right, so those are your heavy industrial areas away from your middle income, away from CBD, away from high income residential areas. And because they offer jobs, informal settlements are established close by, as well as low income residential areas. Now you have the second type of industrial zone, which is the light industrial zone or light industries. So the heavy industries, guys, could include like steel production or a coal processing plant, right? So basically where you have processing on a large scale, right? So that is heavy industries, and your light industries include like your bakeries, basically businesses or industries that produce less pollution. So bakery or your tailor, your panel beater, your mechanics, so on and so on. So these are industries that do not produce a lot of pollution, and so they are allowed to be in the CBD and residential areas. So we have light industries in the CBD, we have light industries in residential areas. So let me actually just go and demonstrate that. So in the CBD, so there you go. So that's your simple bakery over there. It's in the CBD. You're going to find these definitely, guys, in the CBD because they produce less pollution, and so they are allowed to be there. So they produce less air pollution, they produce less noise pollution, and so it makes sense for them to be close by. Okay, so in the CBD and in the residential areas, all residential areas, you're going to find these light industries, right? So that's the reason why. That's the reason why they are in the CBD, is because they produce less air, noise, and air pollution, and actually they do not require a huge amount of space like your heavy industries. So and so it's a no-brainer for them to be part of the CBD or residential areas. Okay. So those are your industrial zones, guys. I need you to know that heavy industries are away from high income areas and away from middle income areas, but close to informal settlements and low income residential areas. Okay, note that. Now let's move on to the next one, which is the transition zone. So that's our next land use zone. Now, the transition zone is located near or around the CBD. Okay, so this is the transition zone. I've actually drawn it right next to the CBD. So it's close to the CBD. Okay, it could also be around the CBD, even though the CBD is expanding, guys, because the CBD is now expanding. They want to expand and expand and expand. They are sprawling, they are moving, they are growing. And so, of course, that will affect other land use zones, right? So this is the transition zone, guys. And as you can tell, guys, it's not managed properly. As you can see, there's rats. I tried to draw a rat there. There's rats. The buildings are not maintained. We say that they are dilapidated, dirty, they have cracks, and the windows have cracks, and the trash is not being well taken care of. The infrastructure, it's not in good condition. So everything here is not in good condition. That's what we call the transition zone or the zone of decay. And I don't know if you've come across this part of the town or part of the city that is not clean at all, where you have a lot of crime occurring, where there's a lot of homeless people and a lot of illegal immigrants, a lot of drug dealing. The landlords do not even take care of their own buildings. They do not maintain their own buildings. The transition zone actually makes the urban area look very unattractive, right? So we say that is urban blight or urban decay. So it's part of the city that is not functional anymore. There's abandoned buildings. There's a lot of crime that occurs in those buildings, and that negatively affects the appeal of the city, right, as a whole. So it affects the city as well, right? So despite being unattractive, this area or this zone is actually high valued land. And that is because it is close to the CBD, or because it is the future expansion of the CBD. Remember, I said that the CBD is constantly expanding, and in the future is going to definitely expand into the transition zone. That's how you identify the transition zone, guys. You look at its position. It should be around the CBD or near the CBD, right next to the CBD. And if you are given an image or a photograph, you should see signs of poor management. So here there's a mixture of functions here. Okay, so it has mixed functions. You have businesses there, so you have companies, people living in there. So there's a mixture of residential and as well as commercial activities. So it is poorly managed or poorly maintained. And this is the reason why. First things first, the landlords do not want to spend money on maintenance. They simply do not want to spend any money on maintaining their properties due to maybe tenants not paying, or due to criminal activities, or due to a lot of rates and levies there. So remember that the city center is quite expensive. So as someone who owns a property, you have to pay all these types of taxes that they charge you, the municipality charges you, and factoring the fact that some tenants do not even pay, how can you even maintain that? Another reason is that there's high criminal activities here. And so landlords, they hesitate to maintain these areas. And when you have a lot of criminals, a lot of people who are involved in criminal activities, they steal a lot of your equipment. They constantly vandalize your equipment, spray painting the building, stealing the copper from the wires of the buildings. You have to buy new wires because they steal the cables, they sell them, so on and so on. So this constant vandalism definitely affects the expenses that have to actually come out from the landlord's pocket. Tenants cannot afford to pay rent because they have rights in SA. You cannot just kick them out simply like that. There's a lot of red tape, a lot of processes that you have to go through, courts, so on and so on. So it's quite complicated than it seems, guys. So we know that the transition zone causes urban blight. It negatively affects the appeal of the urban area. And so what can we do? Okay, what are the solutions to this? So solutions to counteract urban blight. So these are some of them. We will have a video that goes into detail about urban blight, urban decay. So here are some of the solutions that we can implement to counteract this urban blight. Government should provide economic incentives. Okay, tax reduction. Reduce the tax for the people that are going to invest here so that they can be attracted. So attract them by providing these economic incentives, these attractive offers, so that they can come and invest and try to reinvent or re-energize the transition zone, because we need properties that are maintained, constantly maintained. So there should be strict laws as well with regards to the maintenance. So that's the first point. Second point is that law enforcement should work with these investors to get rid of these criminals and drug addicts and even illegal immigrants, to attract more investors to invest in this zone, which is the transition zone. There should be regulation and monitoring of these areas, and it should be intense, okay, to ensure that there's a sustainable solution. So you have to have people that come in and check in those areas to ensure that they are clean, they are now well taken care of. So that should be regulated to ensure that this does not happen ever again in these areas, right? So that is the transition zone, the zone of decay around or near the CBD. Now we head on to residential areas, guys. We have 4 residential areas. We have informal settlements, we have low income residential areas, we have middle income residential areas, and we have high income residential areas. So we'll start with informal settlements. And the concept of informal settlements, they like to ask it in question 1.5, right? So look out for 1.5 on informal settlements. They also have social justice questions there as well. So we'll discuss all of that. So informal settlements, these are illegally built settlements, right? Usually built from materials that are around due to housing shortage. So the location, well, they are on the outskirts of urban areas. They are far away from the CBD. That's where you're going to get informal settlements. And I've actually just tried to draw them here for you. Okay, so these are informal settlements, guys. And the buildings here are built from wood, plastics, just materials that are around, like tires, corrugated zinc. Now, the informal settlements have tiny spaces. Okay, so there's high building density. Each building is close to another building, and it has a tiny space. Buildings here are made out of wood, road signs, cardboards, tires, plastic, corrugated zinc. Combining all of those, I built a shelter, right? Informal settlements have high building and population density. There's a lot of people that live in informal settlements because a lot of people in South Africa are unemployed. A lot of people cannot afford to buy a house, even a low cost house. And so you're going to find out that a lot of people that live in informal settlements do not work, or they live under the poverty line, or they work but they pay very, very low wages. If you do not earn enough money, then that means that you cannot afford to buy a house. And so they therefore settle in these illegally built settlements. And you're going to find out that in these areas, there's lack of basic services, guys. There's no sanitation like piped water. There's no schools. There's no hospitals. You're not going to find those here. There's lack of these basic services, especially in newly built informal settlements. There's lack of effective rubbish collection services. So this lack of basic services also causes land pollution in informal settlements. There's no formal roads, so because they were illegally built, so there's no formal roads. There's irregular roads, unplanned irregular street patterns. Now, because people live in these tiny spaces under these very unhealthy conditions, and because there's a lot of people, okay, a lot of people live there, you find out that even in one particular building, there's a lot, like 5 people living in a very small shelter, right? So this causes overcrowding, right? And overcrowding easily spreads diseases. So if there's any disease, so if there's any outbreak of a disease, it's the poor people that are going to be affected because they live close to each other. There's many people that live in one single building. And so this causes the spread of diseases, this overcrowding, the lack of services here, such as streetlights, make people vulnerable to crime. Okay. So because there's not even street lights here, it's very dark at night, and so criminals take advantage and rob a lot of people in these areas. And it's also due to this irregular street pattern. It's even hard to find someone if you're chasing someone. Okay, even the police, it's even hard for them to get into these areas where a lot of crime occurs. Okay, so emergency services cannot even enter. So an ambulance would have to park the vehicle outside or close to the entrance of the informal settlement because there's tiny spaces, there's tiny roads, and so they cannot even navigate through those areas. In informal settlements, buildings get easily flooded. Okay, we've seen this, guys, over the news. A lot of, actually, every year there's an informal settlement that has flooded. Okay, so they get swept due to this extreme weather during the rainy season. A lot of these buildings get flooded because there's no drainage systems there. A lot of people lose their properties, and fires easily spread, putting people's lives at risk. So because these buildings are made up of wood, plastic, those are flammable, right? So it's easy for the fire to spread because the buildings are right close to each other. And so if one building burns, then everyone is at huge risk because it's easy for the material to burn, and buildings are very close to each other, right next to each other. So those are some of the negative social impacts that residents of informal settlements face. Now, why are informal settlements spreading? Okay, why do we have more and more and more informal settlements? Okay, well, you can say first things first, there's an increasing unemployment rate, right? So more people do not have jobs, and if you do not have a job, that means you cannot afford to buy a house. And so why not settle in informal settlements? Why not just build yourself a shelter where you do not pay rent, or maybe where the rent is very, very affordable, very low? And so the first reason why informal settlements increasing is because of this high employment rate. People cannot afford to even buy low cost housing. Second of all is that there's high inflation rate. And by inflation, guys, we mean the increase in the prices of goods. Okay, just think of bread. How much was bread like 5 years ago? How much is it now? So in SA, the prices of goods is always going up and up and up. And it's even said that they actually want to increase VAT, which is going to increase prices as well. So it's very bad for people who live in poverty, guys. They are the most affected. And so now thinking about this, if you're going to buy bread that is costly, food that is costly, electricity that is costly, so on and so on, how are you going to afford to buy low cost housing that is costly as well now? So that's another point. Low cost housing is expensive because of this high inflation rate. And the last point, there's budget limitations for low cost housing. So because the budget that is allocated for housing is not enough, this means that informal settlements will increase. Okay, we do not have housing, we are going to build more informal settlements because government is not providing us with housing. And remember, guys, every South African citizen is entitled to shelter. Okay, has a right to shelter. And so the government has to actually work harder. Strategies to improve the lives of people in informal settlements. Yeah, I did not have space there, hence I wrote it like that. First things first, you have to create better job opportunities. Create jobs that pay people better so that they can be able to buy low cost houses, build low cost safe housing. Okay, so for an example, the RDP houses, those are low cost, safe houses. They are built using bricks, which is a better material than wood and plastic. Let's supply basic services in these areas: electricity, sanitation, your piped water, schools. Because as much as houses are being built for people, it is occurring at a very slow rate. And so let's provide basic services, because this is social injustice for people living in informal settlements. Provide formal infrastructure. Okay, build roads there, build street lights so that we can prevent a lot of crime. So provide this formal infrastructure here so that businesses are attracted. And of course, if you attract businesses, that means that you attract jobs. You're creating job opportunities indirectly by providing this formal infrastructure. So this is informal settlements. A lot of issues that are occurring there. That's why informal settlements has its own question 1.5, because there's a lot of social injustice that people face, people that are living in informal settlements. So please ensure, guys, that you practice a lot on past papers. Okay, question 1.5. So informal settlements as well as low income residential areas. I don't know what's wrong with my spelling today, guys, but yeah, that's low income residential areas. So informal settlements and low income residential areas are going to be close to industrial areas. So especially for low income residential areas, they are going to be close to the CBD. Close to the CBD, that's close to work. I'm starting to see now that informal settlements are actually becoming close and close to the CBD as well. So you're going to see informal settlements close to the CBD as well nowadays, because of these job opportunities, guys. People want to be close where there's work. They want to save on money, right? So they're close to the CBD or close to industrial areas. Why? Because of employment opportunities. There's employment opportunities in these areas, and it saves transport costs, it saves travel time, and of course, it's affordable land. For an example, close to the industrial areas, being close to industrial areas, remember, industrial areas are situated where there's cheaper land. So you want to build your house on cheap land. Mention that. Employment opportunities for unskilled and semi-skilled people. So low income residential areas. So these are like, for an example, the RDPs. Okay, RDP houses. RDP is a program, guys. So you have to say RDP houses. So those are your low income residential areas. The characteristics here, there's high population density. A lot of people, especially now, a lot of people are living in low income residential areas. It's actually becoming crowded now. Investors are building blocks of flats in low income residential areas. Houses are small, but they are much bigger than the buildings found in informal settlements. There's a similar style or similar design. That's how you identify a low income residential area. This is it. These houses are the same. All of them are the same, right? So that's how you identify it. Even if you are given a diagram, it's easy to identify low income residential areas. They are the same. They have the similar design because they are built by government. The RDP houses, so that they have the similar design. That's the easiest way to identify them. Look at their designs, the same. They usually appear to be in rows. Okay, as I said, these are your RDP houses, and there's little or no recreational facilities like parks. You're not going to find parks. Maybe parks are there. Maybe there is a park, a recreational park, but it is not in good state. And you have social injustices. So social injustices include like the pollution from industrial areas, because these are, as I said, guys, located close to industrial zones. So this pollution causes health-related issues. You have poor service delivery here. So in townships, you always have an issue with electricity. You have an issue with waste collection. They do not arrive on time, so on and so on. But yeah, the service delivery is very poor. So those are some of the social injustices. We actually have a concept of social injustices, so we'll talk about that in the coming videos, guys, so do not mind that, right? So that is your low income residential areas. Look at its surroundings. Is it close to the heavy industries or close to the CBD? Then you know that is a low income residential area. If you're given a photograph, then look at the design. Is it the same? Is it similar design? Are they in rows? That's how you identify low income residential areas. Right now, let's move on to the next residential zone, which is the middle income residential zone or middle income residential area. So these areas are quite similar to high income residential areas. Okay. So to basically put it simple for you, middle income residential areas are away from the CBD, right? They have a good view. Areas maybe close to the beach, so on and so on. Quite clean. They have very large properties, right, that are unique. They are not the same as your low income residential areas, right? So they have larger properties that are unique, and they have recreational spaces. These are beautiful areas. They have parks. It's clean. Okay. You have people that clean there like every day. It's managed well. So those are your middle income residential areas. They have good services. If there's anything there, like for example, power shuts down, there's going to be immediate response. So these are your middle income residential areas. Yes, they have larger properties, but they do not have luxurious properties. Clean properties, large properties that are unique from each other, good neighborhood, clean neighborhood, good services, so on and so on. Away from the CBD, away from the noise, away from chaos. That's how you identify these two, middle income and high income. They are always away from your industrial areas. Okay, so this is your middle income, guys. Let me just show you. Okay, so this is an example of your middle income. It's clean, away from your industries, away from the noise. I know that it seems close here, but yeah, I tried, guys. As I said, this was not accurate. So these are your middle income. Okay, not luxurious, but good enough space, large space, clean area. Yeah, well maintained basically. So those are your middle income residential areas. That's what they have in common. Away from chaos, as I said, away from the noise, away from CBD where there's traffic congestion, away from industrial areas, because you're going to find out that they can afford to buy cars. And so they do not have to be close to the CBD. They do not have to be close to the industrial areas. Okay. They can actually go there with their vehicles, or they earn enough money for them to be able to commute there daily. So that is your middle income and high income. High income is also far away from the CBD and the heavy industrial areas. Remember, we said where chaos is, they are far away from the chaos, far away from the noise, both of them. Middle income and high income residential areas, usually close to natural aesthetical areas, good views, scenic views, okay, especially high income residential areas. This is where you're going to find mansions or a very luxurious home, okay, house on the hills, for an example, right over here, right? So this guy has a house on the hill that overlooks the urban area as a whole. And there's that guy over there. Okay, he's sitting on a pool, that infinity pool. I mean, he's having a great time. So these are very expensive houses. So of course, housing is expensive. They like to have good views, and they like to be a far away, very far away from the CBD, very far away from your industries. Okay, so areas that are filled with a lot of nature around them. So like your Camps Bay, your Hout Bay, they like to be closer to, like, yeah, as I said, natural aesthetical areas like the beach or like your rivers or close to the golf course actually. So high income residential areas are also found in the rural urban fringe, where the urban area meets the rural areas. Okay, so that's where you're going to find them, next to a golf course, next to nature, as I said, close to shopping malls. Okay, so these are rich people, wealthy people that live in these areas. So the characteristics of high income residential areas are your expensive houses. Okay, so there's expensive houses, they're very expensive, like hundreds of millions, if not tens of millions. There's high value of land there. And yeah, there's beautiful views. House on the hills, as I said, next to the beach, next to nature, next to golf course, close to shopping malls. So those areas. And yes, high income residential areas as well as heavy industries are not compatible. They can never be close to each other. And they like to actually ask that question as well. Why is it that? Why are they not compatible? Why are they not close to each other? High income residential areas prefer scenic views. They prefer areas that are naturally beautiful. And of course, they want to avoid that air pollution from heavy industries. They pay a good price to be there. So that air pollution, that smoke coming from heavy industries, they want to avoid that. So the first one, as I said, high income residential areas are found where there are scenic views, okay? Not where there's just flat land, okay? Because that's what heavy industries are looking for. They're looking for flat land, they're looking for cheap land value. That's not what high income residential areas look for. They look for scenic views, beautiful views. Heavy industries prefer cheap flat land so that they could expand, whereas high income residential areas, they prefer scenic views, beautiful views, and so that's why it is expensive there. And they don't mind building on a hill, having a house on a hill, as I demonstrated. They want to avoid that pollution or unpleasant smell produced by heavy industries. There's a lot of traffic congestion where heavy industries are, so they want to also avoid traffic congestion, which is going to be found near heavy industrial zones. So that's high income residential areas, guys. Be able to identify it, as I said, be able to identify all of these. I've mentioned the characteristics of each and every one of them. So please be able to identify it, and you can identify it by its location, identify it by the other land use zones that are close to it. So therefore, if you have an area, a residential area that is close to heavy industry, it can never be high income residential area. Right. What about rural urban fringe? So rural urban fringe, it is where now it's starting to feel like it's rural areas. You're away from the city. It's on the periphery of the city, the outskirts of the city, the outskirts of the urban area. That is the location of rural urban fringe. So this is where you have your golf courses, where you have your farms, okay, like your Cape winelands. That's an example of a rural urban fringe. So here there's cheaper land, okay, it's cheaper than the CBD, it's cheaper than the city center, but there's enough land to expand because the building density is not high, and of course the land is cheap. It has access to infrastructure. There's roads and actually railways that pass through these areas. You have raw materials from the farms. So you're going to have manufacturing that is close by here. So your industries are going to be close by because, well, there's raw materials from these farms and there's access to infrastructure, enough land to expand. All of the reasons why heavy industries would want to be situated in rural urban fringe. There's access to flat land. There's less traffic congestion. Few people live there. They are actually close to the labor force, right? So this is the perfect environment for heavy industries as well. So as you can see, those contrast, okay? Remember, high income residential areas want to live in these areas, and also heavy industries want to be in these areas. So we can clearly see that there's a conflict in the rural urban fringe where you can have high residential areas here as well as industrial areas. Remember now, these two, we said that they are not compatible, right? So it will depend basically on the question. In that particular diagram, you could have high income residential areas there, and they could ask you why they are there. Well, this area is far away from the CBD. That's the reason why. It's far away from the noise or the chaos, and it is naturally beautiful, naturally aesthetic, scenic views, as we said. That's what high income residential areas are looking for. Beautiful views. They're looking for natural beauty, and so that's why you can also find them in rural urban fringe. In some questions, you could have heavy industrial areas in this land use zone, and well, the reason is because this is cheaper land. There's enough land to expand here. There's access to infrastructure. There's raw materials from the farms that are around. There's labor supply from the neighboring communities. There's access to flat land. There's less traffic congestion. So these definitely do favor heavy industrial areas. But the fact that the rural urban fringe is far away from the CBD, there's less traffic congestion, and it's naturally beautiful. There's scenic views. This means that this could be a perfect area for high income residential people. Okay, now let's take a look at the characteristics of rural urban fringe. This is basically where the urban areas meet with the rural areas. Here you're going to find agricultural activities. Okay, so your primary activities, you're going to find them here. You're also going to find industries, as we said. So that is your manufacturing, your secondary activities here. And in contrast to industries, you're going to actually find high income residential areas. And as I said, guys, it will depend on the question. Okay, so please note that. Okay, the compatibility of rural urban fringe to both heavy industrial areas and high income residential areas. Now, what positive impact does heavy industries in this particular area, the rural urban fringe, have on nearby communities? Well, if you have heavy industries here, this means that you're going to provide job opportunities for the neighboring communities. People will be able to get jobs. Okay, and not only are you giving them jobs, but you're also providing them, or you are contributing to skills development of the community. So that is also important. That is a separate point, guys. Let's try to, as I said, let's break this down. Okay, we know that providing someone a job, this means that this person is going to go through training. They are going to develop their skills, right? So let's place these as different points when we are writing those paragraphs. So that is the smart way to write down these paragraphs. We know that this is a, as I said, that snowball effect. Apply that when you are asked to discuss impacts, so on and so on. So be able to break those down into different points. So it provides job opportunities, these heavy industrial areas. They also participate in skills development of the community, and it also improves the buying power. Okay, because now you've given someone a job, they are able to buy things or stuff that they could not afford before. So this means that you have improved their buying power. Now they are able to buy more things than before. Okay. This increases the standard of living. You are able to afford even better housing, even a better shelter. If you were staying in a shack or in one of the buildings that you'll get in the informal settlement, now you are going to be able to maybe rent an RDP house or one of the low cost buildings. Now that increases your standard of living, and your affordability increases as well, because now you are able to buy things that you were not able to buy. Okay, so that's what we're talking about there. So again, guys, different points: buying power, standard of living, job opportunities, skills development. Those are separate points. Please separate them. And then the last point is that it lowers prices of goods. So if you stay next to where they manufacture maybe yogurts, those yogurts are going to be cheaper definitely than someone who's staying in a different province. So that's how it works. So if these products are produced here, right here, and I stay right next to there, I can just go in there and go buy these products fresh from the manufacturing department. But if someone stays in a different province, they would have to transport those goods from that warehouse all the way to that particular province. And so, of course, that costs them a lot of money. And so, therefore, those prices there are going to increase. So it's an advantage if you stay close to where they manufacture those particular goods. It's going to be cheaper for you guys. Okay, so we see this urban expansion in modern times where you have that CBD expanding. Okay, so you can imagine this, guys. This is the CBD, right? So this is the CBD. The CBD is going to expand, 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 and it's definitely going to reach the rural urban fringe. And so how are these areas then going to be affected? How is this rural urban fringe going to be affected by this urban expansion? Because that's what we see nowadays, that the urban areas are growing physically. Okay, so we're seeing urban sprawl all over the urban area. So they are moving or invading these areas, these rural urban fringe land use zones. Now let's think about this. Let's say now you have businesses opening right here. Okay, so businesses now are establishing themselves in this area. Okay, so let's say now this CBD is invading here. So you have businesses building their buildings right here in the rural urban fringe. So now this means that more people are going to travel here because more people want work, right? And so they are going to commute here daily. Okay, so the traffic congestion, first of all, will increase. And because other businesses see many people going here or a lot of activity going in there, they are going to also want to open their businesses here. So now everyone wants to be here because, well, there's many customers here. There's so many people that are coming here daily. So let me go there and sell my stuff. Let me go there and sell my products. Let me go there and open my business here. So now this means that the value of the land will increase because the demand has increased. Okay, so this increases the demand because everyone wants to be here. And so the value of the land now increases. So that's what we mean there by this will increase the value of the land, this urban expansion on this land. This will decrease the availability of land. Okay, so because there's so many businesses opening up, everyone is taking up space. And so this means that land will not be available for farming or even land that was potentially good for farming. So that land now will not be available because now buildings have been built over that land. Okay, so it decreases the availability of land. This would increase pollution because there's so many people. You're going to have a lot of noise pollution. You're going to have a lot of air pollution, a lot of water pollution because so many people are there. And because you are going to also have industries like your small industries. So that's air pollution increasing there. Services will be put under pressure, increasing the prices as well. So many people and less services to provide for them. Agricultural output will decrease, will increase in traffic, increase in crime, and destruction of biodiversity. And this is simply because if you have a lot of people moving into an area, there's going to be a lot of buildings. So when that foundation is built, you're definitely going to dig. You're definitely going to remove vegetation. And by doing that, you are already destroying the biodiversity and ecosystems that are around. So that is your impact or the dangers of urban expansion on the rural urban fringe. Now we head on to our final land use zone, which is the green belt. Right. Now, a green belt, guys, as the name suggests, this is a green area that is allocated where it is strictly illegal to have any buildings built on this particular land use zone. So this is allocated right close to the CBD to resolve some of the issues that we see in the CBD, right? So a green belt is simply a confined area that is placed there to specifically preserve nature. Remember, the CBD, guys, is made up of all these man-made materials, concrete, tar, glass. There's no vegetation at all. So we need to allocate an area of nature where the birds can come and pollinate some of the vegetation that we see here. This is an area that is also of recreation significance. So this is also where people can come and relax, surrounded by nature. So it also offers that peace of mind because the CBD is so busy and it's so noisy. So people do need this to break away from all the chaos, from all the noise, and from all the congestion that you see in the CBD, right? So it's also used for recreational activities. And going to our diagram, guys, there's let me just erase this, right? So there's our green belt over there. So I'll try to basically demarcate it to sort of have this fence going around it like that, to have this fence all around it. So this is where you are going to have all the vegetation, your trees, your plants, all different types of plants, where you can go and relax and have fun with your family, have a picnic, so on and so on. So it's basically those areas of vegetation that are allocated for nature and recreational activities. Now, why is it so important that we have a green belt area? Now, first things first, a green belt prevents uncontrollable growth in an urban area, right? We know that the CBD is going to expand, but it definitely cannot expand into this green belt. So it basically acts as a buffer to prevent this expansion into the green belt, okay? So we need to have these areas where the CBD cannot expand through them. So that is important because the CBD is really expanding at a very fast pace. Having a green belt there reduces that uncontrollable growth. It improves the beauty or the aesthetic appeal of urban areas. and that is important for the tourism sector as well. It controls greenhouse gases by absorbing them. Okay, so it's strictly made up of nature, and therefore, if you have nature, you have trees. Trees take in carbon dioxide that we produce by burning the fossil fuels. It controls these greenhouse gases that are produced by those light industrial areas or those light industrial businesses in the CBD, therefore reducing air pollution there. It protects the natural environment, as I said. No one is allowed to have a building there. You cannot have any sort of building here. It's strictly nature here. And so this means that the natural environment is protected. This is where nature can come and interact peacefully without having to be invaded by huge buildings. It promotes water infiltration, therefore raising water table. So because there's a lot of vegetation, guys, as we learned from geomorphology, a lot of vegetation basically slows down surface runoff, and now all this vegetation holds this water basically in one position so that it can be able to infiltrate, and therefore this raises that water table. This provides clean air or provides oxygen. So we know that through photosynthesis, vegetation takes in carbon dioxide and produces oxygen, which is what we need. So that's what we mean by providing clean air or providing oxygen. So trees, vegetation are of utmost importance, guys. This reduces the effects of urban heat island because number one, it absorbs these greenhouse gases, which would definitely increase the temperature by absorbing the extraterrestrial radiation. And number two, the plants transpire, right? So this is a process whereby the plants release water as water vapor, and this basically cools down the plants and also the surrounding area. So through transpiration, they cool down the urban area. They contribute to the cooling down of the urban area. So that is important, guys, in fighting against urban heat island. So it's critical that we have green belts because they resolve a lot of issues that you're going to find in the CBD, issues that are caused by humans or human activities. So that is green belt, and that is our last land use zone. Now for the last part, we have the term urban profile. So in question 1.4, you can be provided a diagram that has either a model, urban area model, which we will do in the next video, or you can be provided a diagram or a picture or an urban profile. Okay, so an urban profile is basically a side view of an urban area, right? So we call it an urban profile. Be able to define this term. Urban profile is the side view of an urban area. It mostly shows the height of the buildings, but you also have to note the density here as well as the land value of the land use zones as you're moving from the center, which is the CBD, moving towards the rural urban fringe or away or towards the periphery of the urban area. So as we can clearly see, guys, the tallest buildings are here at the center. So this is the CBD. It's pretty easy to identify the CBD. The tallest buildings are here. And as you can see, next to the CBD, we have the transition zone, which is going to be next to the CBD, the zone of decay. You have light industries as well. So light industries are also part of the transition zone and also part of the CBD. You also have your low income residential. Okay, now take a look at this, guys. This is your high or middle income residential on the right hand side, and this is your low income residential areas. Look at your low income residential areas. They are close to where? They are close to where? They are close to heavy industries, right? Even if they were somewhere close to the CBD, even if they were here, that means they would be close to the CBD. Okay, what's important there is that low income residential areas are always going to be close to place of work. Always, guys, always close to place of work. You cannot have middle or high income residential areas here close to heavy industries. So they are going to be away from your heavy industries. They are going to be close to maybe an OBE, OBD, right? Oh, I'm sorry about that. So it should be OBD, which is outlying business districts. So those are your high or middle income residential areas, close to also a shopping center, right? And next to rural urban fringe. This means that they are far away from the CBD. So your urban profile should look something like this, and you should be able to identify land use zones by looking at the proximity of other land use zones. That's how you can effectively identify all of these land use zones. Now, taking a look at the height, guys, what happens to the height as I move away from the center or from the city center? The height decreases, right? That's what we see. So you have the tallest buildings in the CBD, and then the height decreases as you move towards the edge of the urban area, right? As well as density. The density is highest in the CBD, or it is high in the CBD because, well, informal settlements also have a high building density as well as your low income residential. So density is high here. The general trend is that you have a highest density or a high density in the CBD, and as you move towards your rural urban fringe, the density decreases. What about the land value now? The land value is highest in the CBD, and it becomes lower and lower as you move towards the rural urban fringe. So ensure that you are able to describe the trend of the height of buildings, the density of buildings, the land value when it comes to urban profile, because that is also stated here in your CAPS document, the factors influencing the morphological structure of the city. That's what they are referring to there: the height, the density, as well as the land value of the urban area, right? Okay, so comparing the center and the edges, what happens there regarding those three factors. Okay, so that is the land use zones. I hope this was made simple. I really hope that you understand these concepts better now. The most important thing, guys, is to practice. I can sit here and talk a lot and explain as much as I can, but if you don't practice, then this won't be of any good use. Thank you guys for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next one.